T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All 3 engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and lift off.
Coach on Fire Radio.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of your Journey to Success podcast, brought to you this week by Drew DeGrazia of Reach Local. I'm your host, Kenny Weiss, and I'm a life coach, speaker, and author based here in Phoenix. The goal here each week is to create a movement of people who are passionate about getting real information to move out of something I like to call the worst day cycle. All of us have suffered some sort of worst day. For me, it was finding my alcoholic mother passed out naked on the toilet at 10 years old. I've discovered that day creates a self-destructive process that keeps us all from the life we want. I describe that process and I give you a roadmap on how to overcome it in my new book, Your Journey to Success, which is available on Amazon in all different formats. So each week I try and bring a guest who specializes in a certain aspect of how that worst day cycle plays out in our life, so we can gain the right information and tools to finally step into what I believe we all have, our inherent greatness and purpose. With that in mind, today I have Madeleine Black. It's Madeleine, isn't it?
Madeleine, yes.
Madeleine Black. And she's going to share how she transformed her life and started to live in her greatness. It started with the sharing of her story publicly in a book called The Forgiveness Project. And it was on a website in September of 2014. That opened many doors for Madeleine in ways she never imagined, and the invitations just started pouring in. Many women and men got in contact and explained how reading her story gave them strength, hope, and a different perspective of what's possible in our lives. The founder of the Forgiveness Project, I have the names mixed up here. Who was the founder of that?
The founder is called Marina Kantakazuna.
Yeah, Marina. She often refers to the various people on her website, like Madeleine, as story healers rather than storytellers. And now you will see pretty quickly here, you can understand why that will be. Madeleine has taken part in both TV and radio interviews and has been invited to share her story of being gang raped as a teenager at conferences, events, and schools in an effort to help others. She recognizes that she was a victim of a crime that left her silent for many years, but she's found her voice and intends to use it, not just for her, but for so many who can't find theirs just yet. Her memoir, Unbroken, was published on April 4th, 2017. If you've suffered anything like this, I really highly recommend that you get it. The reviews are through the roof, and the response to it and the amount of people it's helped has been incredible. So, Madeleine, thank you for being here. And why don't we just start with that? Let's get right to it. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your story?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned there, my story starts in the late 1970s when I was gang raped by 2 American teenagers, and I was 13 years old.
Amazing. As I listened to your story, when you went through that, you have a video on YouTube about it where you get into graphic detail. You're not afraid to share any of it. Why do you feel that's so important to share all of that?
Well, I went through many different phases of whether I should share the details or not. And initially, my editor, who I worked with, Joe, when I was writing my book, Unbroken, he said, you need to put all the details in. He had read a short story of what I had written, and I said, there's no way. I don't want anyone to know all the details. I would be so ashamed. And he explained to me that as a man, it really helped him to understand about rape and what could take place and how it can be very violent. He really thought you would just be overpowered, like a Mills and Boon kind of, she said no, he said yes, and that was it. But he realized there was a far more to it. So he convinced me it would be a good idea. So when I was publishing my book, my publisher said, no, we don't want the details in. We think it's too much. And then I said, no, I need all the details in. I don't want to sanitize it. I don't want to make it easy for people to read. We should be uncomfortable. We should feel dis-ease reading something that isn't nice, because this is what takes place on our planet somewhere every day, globally, all the time.
I can't tell you. I had the same experience writing my book. The editors were like, you can't say this stuff. You're going to offend people. And I said, when I talk about the worst day cycle, I said, you just proved how important it is that I share this. It's because nobody wants to go there. And that's what creates this cycle, is our denial and refusal to face it. And so, I mean, I even put it in the book, that whole conversation with him. I was like, no, it has to be. I have to confront people, because this is what's keeping us from the life we want. Would you be willing to share? Because I know there are people listening and watching who have been through a horrific event, and they don't want to share it either. But I believe the only freedom comes from sharing it. Would you be willing to share some of the details so that the people who are in that place get that permission to go there as well?
Yeah, well, a girlfriend and I came up with a plan one night, and we decided to go and buy some alcohol and meet some boys. We were 13, and to cut a long story short, I got very drunk very quickly. I had never drunk, and I was about half the size I am now, so it went to my head very quickly. And these two young men took us back to her mum's empty flat, which is where we weren't meant to be staying, but we'd lied about where we were staying. Yeah. They put us into separate bedrooms, and it became very clear very early on that they weren't there to let me sleep off the alcohol, that they were there for something else. And when I started to fight back, the violence just escalated. So really, I would say the attack lasted for about 4 or 5 hours. And it's very odd, the trauma, because at the time I found it very hard to remember all of the details. But basically, when I woke up the next morning, my friend was in the bed now next to me. One of the last things they did, they held the knife against my throat, and they said if I told anyone, they would kill me. And I believed them at that point. So my friend is now in the bed next to me. She's fully clothed, and I can hear the bracelets on her wrist jangling, and I thought they were the keys in the door, that they were coming back. I now had traces of vomit, which I knew about, but there was now blood, excrement, semen on my body. I had been stabbed. There were cigarette burns. There were other injuries. But at that time, it was very, very hazy. Yeah. And I couldn't speak about it because I believed it was my fault. And because of the trauma, I couldn't find my voice. So we chose just to tidy up the flat and go home. And then the following day went back to school as if nothing happened. But of course, what we don't speak about, it leaks out of us. And it leaked out of me in many ways. I became anorexic. I would use drink and drugs. I can see now anything to numb out. I became very promiscuous, which is a very common side effect from someone that's been raped, because I thought if a guy tried it on, I would just let them do it, because I was terrified of being hurt again. I became suicidal. I attempted suicide. I ended up in a children's psychiatric ward for about 8 weeks. And no one ever understood why I had tried to do this. I can just see now, I was trying to find my voice. I was rebelling in all the ways I thought I could that somebody may guess, but nobody ever guessed until I finally told them. Yeah.
That's the piece I talk about in my book, the cycle, the shame piece of when we've been through trauma, we then re-victimize ourselves because at least we're in control of it. And even you can logically say, why am I doing this, or this is wrong? Our power was taken from, you talked about being, I think it was tied to the radiator, and you're left completely powerless. And so the re-victimization of being promiscuous and drinking and suicide, things, I went through similar things of re-victimizing myself. And what I've discovered is at least we're choosing it. And
I don't know at that age if I was even conscious of what I was doing. I think it was just the impact of the trauma exploding in my body. I think it just reacted just in a biological way. It's just what our bodies do when we're faced with trauma.
I love that. I wanted to. That's one of the questions I wanted to get into, because the importance of body work, and that people don't realize that every emotion we experience, we store in us physically. That's what gets us sick and hurt. If you're suffering from disease and illness, it's emotion that's trapped and trying to get out. And pills may be a pathway, but they're not the ultimate solution. Your body's screaming at you that you're in pain emotionally and you need to deal with it. Can you share more about how, it's obviously you dissociated from your body with the trauma, but the way your body stored your trauma, what sort of ways did that show up? And then I want to get into the work that you did to get rid of it.
Well, the way it was in my body was that I couldn't speak. Yeah. I couldn't eat. I couldn't function. I couldn't speak civilly to anyone. I was so full of rage and hate and anger. I was sarcastic. I was horrible. Yeah. My parents said, do this. I would do the opposite. I just rebelled. It was obviously something inside. I was screaming the words, but I just couldn't find my voice. The words wouldn't come out. Yeah. And so, many, many years later, it was really body therapy that really helped me.
Can you explain that? Because I know for a lot of people, they have no idea. Like I know with my clients, I encourage them, yoga, acupressure, everyone stores their trauma differently in their body. Yeah. And so whether it's working out, it can be several different ways, massage, where that can come out. Can you tell us more about how you were able to get it out?
Sure. So it was a real point when I thought I was healed, and I thought, great, I've done it now, because when I first met my husband, I told him I would never become a mum, because I thought that giving birth, that was just going to be like being raped again. But then I kind of reversed my thinking, and I thought, if I never become a mother, they would have taken all of that power away from me, and I didn't want them to have that power. So it was then that I came up with my plan that I call my best revenge. And I really thought I was okay, but trauma has a habit of sneaking back up just when we least expect it. And my oldest daughter, Anna, turned 13, so she was now the same age as I was. And there was a combination of events. I was studying psychotherapy and I was doing a lot of personal development courses, but it was really her becoming 13 that triggered memories, nightmares, flashbacks, and I just thought I was going mad. I thought, well, if it was so bad, then surely I would have remembered it. And now I understand it's because it was so bad that my mind shut it off and it was protecting me. Yeah. But it's very confusing when it comes in. So I did lots of talking therapies, and the talking therapies helped, but I really still couldn't trust all these memories. And I said to my therapist, maybe I've made it up. I worked with women's issues organizations for so many years. I said, I've just heard so many other women's stories. Maybe I've just made it up. So he recommended that I went for therapeutic massage. And it's exactly what you talk about. It's not just a regular massage. They're able to dive into your emotions, which are trapped within your cells, because every cell stores everything. It's in there. Yeah. And the very first time I went for therapeutic massage, I could hear this person shouting and screaming and crying and kicking. And then I realized it was me. Yeah. All that was coming from me. And I was, first of all, being British, I was mortified. I was so ashamed, but I couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't stop crying. And it just released what the talking therapy couldn't release. Yeah. Yeah. So that really helped. And as you said, sport and other things. So I thought I was great because I ran every day. But I came to a conclusion, actually, that I was just running. I was running emotionally and I was running physically. So for me, because very much on that night when it took place, I was very aware that there was a moment where I completely left my body. Yeah. So at one moment I am down on the floor, but then I'm up on the cupboard watching everything take place to this woman on the floor who was me. So it was a very kind of surreal moment. So my journey has always been about remembering all the details, but getting back into my body. Yeah. So the things I do now, I am a power lifter, I do karate, I do windsurfing. They're all things that require me to be in. I can't lift double my weight if I'm deadlifting, if I'm not connected to my heels or my core or my body. You can't just pick it up off the ground. Yeah. And running, I could just run on empty. I could run on empty for hours. So for some people it will help, but for me, I saw what I was doing with it. So karate as well. A punch doesn't come from my hand. It comes from my heel. It comes from my hips. Yeah. So I had to find a way to get back into my body.
There's so much in there that you just said that I want to touch on.